Global Hawk test team leader and commander at Edwards from 1998 to 2001, then the Expeditionary Reconnaissance Squadron commander from 2001 to 2002, and then finally the 12th Reconnaissance Squadron commander from 2002 to 2004. So I saw 6.5 years of effort with Global Hawk from second flight to combat deployments. Global Hawk was an advanced concept technology demonstrator put into the Air Force by the Pentagon at the Joint Staff level. It didn't have an Air Force sponsor, and so there was a desire by our combat command to get some familiarity with the system in case it became a weapon. The job was to explain that the airplane was actually ridiculously capable with 3 sensors, 24-hour duration, that we were going to be able to do things in specific Air Force hot button areas like time-sensitive targeting, and that we were going to need a new concept of operations to do that. And that became very controversial because there were people who didn't want to see Global Hawk progress. There were also people who didn't want to see a new concept of operations that upset the U-2 paradigm. I would say there was an even stronger desire to kill the ACTD because it was seen as a competitor at the time with the U-2, probably mistakenly seen as a competitor with the U-2 in my opinion. So team building was an incredibly important part of the program. We had 5 pilots and 12 maintainers and logisticians, and we had 1 technical engineer who was there to develop technical concepts related to logistics. The best way to lead these guys was to find out the 1 or 2 things they did really well, and almost all of them had a talent either in flying aircraft or in mission planning or in operations that overcame maybe some other weaknesses they had in other areas. And through kind of a mentoring process, those guys became the owner of those processes. Like one guy became the owner of mission planning. And virtually all of them got progressed from company grade to field grade, and in most cases up to lieutenant colonel where they retired. At Edwards, we had a very difficult command structure. We were an ACC unit in an ACC squadron. So we were a team of 17 people in a squadron of a couple hundred, the 31st Test and Evaluation Squadron. Wing headquarters was at Eglin Air Force Base, so 2,500 miles away, and that was the 53rd Test Wing. And the 53rd Test Wing had a TEG, a Test Evaluation Group, at Nellis. So I think the point here to get is that we had 06s and 07s and 08s, very interested in what we were doing, geographically dispersed between Nellis, Edwards, and Florida, and all reporting back to Virginia. To communicate up into the supervisor world, we had to produce, data that showed what we were doing, and then we had to back that up with communications that made the point to senior officers who might only have 15 minutes to absorb a complex story. The commander of ACC had us in for 25 minutes and did listen to the work we were doing in that summer of 2001, and that resulted in us deploying after 9/11 happened in 2001 to support operations in Afghanistan. Leading up into the supervisory chain was made challenging by the fact that we had colonels on the staff in the Pentagon calling down directly to my 06 level and then into our squadron commander level with some really negative comments about what we were doing, because they didn't want to see Global Hawk move forward from a programmatic or a political space within the Air Force. When you're working with an intelligence platform and you come from a fighter background, as I did, you do have insight into how people use intelligence. And at the time, the biggest challenge in the Air Force was, in the war on terrorism, is striking very, very small targets that move very quickly. So time-sensitive targeting, as it was called back in the late 90s and the early aughts, was a hot-button issue in Air Combat Command and within the military generally. Global Hawk actually was really good at this, and we proved this in a deployment to Australia. And What we took away from that Australia piece was that Global Hawk had to integrate laterally. And within the Air Force and in the joint structure, this meant working with the Combined Air Ops Center, the CAOC. And it meant understanding who the consumers of our information were and understanding how they needed it so that we could get it to them at the right place, the right time, and so that it would be useful, because time-sensitive information an hour late is no good. Quick story of failure. We imaged bin Laden's team, probably 80% sure, evacuating out of Tora Bora in December of 2001. And we called the Combined Air Ops Center and said, hey, we've got people on the move and it looks like it's our highest value target. We had an intelligence exploitation cell located with us that was able to make that determination. We were able to image in infrared these people leaving out of Tora Bora. Disappointingly, 3 weeks later, the Army called us with an urgent request for us to explain who those people were, by which time, obviously, they were long gone. Success story. In 2003, we were able to integrate with the Air Operations Center to such a degree that when we imaged tanks with our radar at night, and we believed we'd found the Iraqi Guards Division that was guarding the approaches to Baghdad, I was able to chat that to my liaison officer, a 12th Reconnaissance Squadron Major, who we trained specifically for this task. And he was able to socialize with the Strike Eagle team so that that data was immediately inserted into the Strike Eagle data link. It appeared in the cockpit of a Strike Eagle. He cued his lantern sensor there, saw tanks, and they stayed on target for 2 refuelings and put almost 70 tanks out of action in the course of 6 hours of the mission. And that really opened up the approach to Baghdad. We progressed to the stage where we were able to kick off one of the most successful Air Force missions in history. And the story that it told was that an embedded team with sustainable 5-6 years of experience in a new platform can do good things. And secondarily, that that embedded team had to swim a little bit upstream against the embedded Air Force process to say, hey, this is a new way of doing business. And that we had a general who understood this, and because of the success of our mission against the Iraqi Guards Division, the Secretary of the Air Force flew into Beale and took a briefing at my squadron, which is, to say the slightest, is very unusual. And when he'd seen that brief, he said, this is what we want to happen with our new weapon systems, and he forwarded me up the chain to the commander, General Jumper, Chief of Staff. And just for courtesy reasons, we made a quick stop over at CENTAF headquarters to brief General Mosley, who would succeed General Jumper as Chief of Staff. And he told us his perspective on what he'd seen. And then we went out to General Jumper and briefed him with just 2 other people present in his outer office. And told him what our lessons learned were. I think that it's incredible that, you could essentially be a squadron commander and, my liaison officers were captains and majors, and that we could string this story together that had the interest of the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. But at the end of the day, Global Hawk became a full-on program, and of course it's today a complete part of the Air Force reconnaissance system, and the 12th RS, I'm happy to say, is still active at Beale with later version airplanes.